Welcome to Men in the City from Brooklyn, New York City. Well, I hope you're doing well wherever you may be. In today's video, we're going to talk about female attraction, or more specifically, what I call attracting a woman ideas to be overcome. So on this channel, we largely talk about finance, we talk about geopolitics, we've talked about the sexual marketplace from a more theoretical standpoint, and we talk about male improvement or men's improvement. But we haven't talked all that much about attraction. So I thought today we could walk and talk a little bit about attracting women and what that's all about, and I'll try to be less theoretical or pedantic about it, but there's some important ideas that we've got to consider, especially given the deluge of content that's on the internet. So let me begin by stressing the first principle, and that is that when we think about attraction or the sexual marketplace, as men, we tend to think about it from a logical standpoint, but we've got to think about it through the lens of the female psyche, the female mind, because at the end of the day, the sexual marketplace is their domain, their attitudes, their thinking, their emotions, and that's the key word, really drive the process of attraction, at least as it pertains to men trying to attract women. So that's the first principle. The second is that we need to remember that men, as I said in a couple videos past, are ideas, and women are the receptacle of those ideas. So how you present yourself really needs to embody a mentality. It needs to embody more than just your physique or how much money you make. You know, those things may seem like they're enough, and that's what a lot of folks emphasize. But at the end of the day, it's the ideas that we embody, it's the value sets, it's the worldview that we convey that is particularly attractive to the opposite sex. And women, make no mistake, are programmed. They're very well adept at sensing or detecting or understanding your value, right? The values that you express. And they're so well versed in this that most of them, in about 30 seconds, can size you up and digest what you're bringing to the table. So never forget that, and don't underestimate their ability to perceive your value, okay? All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about how we need to approach this as men, especially from the standpoint of masculinity. And the first principle here, the first concept that I'd like to convey, and I will share this on the screen, is economy. Economy. Now, when a woman assesses your value, or when she sizes you up, as I said a moment ago, she does so in a very economical fashion. And that is precisely how we should approach women. In other words, women decide fairly quickly, not in all cases, but for the most part, how they feel about you, okay? And feelings are essential here. Remember that women feel first, and in many respects, that is their conclusion about you, is how you make them feel. There's a famous quote from Maya Angelou. She said that people don't remember what you say, they don't remember what you do, but they do remember how you make them feel. And that is especially the case when it comes to women, okay? And feelings are not logical. That's a point we'll come back to in just a moment. But how they feel about you, it can change, but in the immediate halo effect of meeting you, they size you up pretty fast, right? They determine whether or not they feel something for you or not. And as a result, they either categorize you as a non-entity or a non-sexual entity, something they're not all that taken with and won't invest further time in, or maybe a potential friend or a viable sexual partner. We have to do the same thing with women. And most men, when they assess females, they do so from the standpoint of their physical attraction. This is a big mistake. Most women that we find attractive are voluminous. There are more than a few of them in the world. So that's not judicious enough. It's not choosy enough. And if you run around chasing what you find physically attractive, you're going to end up wasting a lot of time. Again, economy. You have to economize your effort. This is very problematic for young men. Young men spend almost all their time chasing females. This is an egregious mistake, especially when you're in your 20s. Because when you're in your 20s, you should be focused on self-improvement. You should be focused on figuring out what you want to do with your life. You should be focused on your mission or finding a mission that's worthy of your life. And remember that that allows you to become the idea that ultimately women will then gravitate towards, or at least the women that you really want to be with. So you need to ruthlessly economize with women. How do you do that? Well, the first is you need to think very clearly about what it is you want from a woman beyond just her appearance. Appearance is very superficial. You can size it up based on hair color, eye color, hip to waist ratio. Do you like voluptuous women? Do you like tall women? Whatever. That's something you can answer in about 30 seconds. But what else is there? What else is there? Do you like women that are particularly feminine or attractive? Do you like women that are a bit more assertive and aggressive? These are questions you have to ask. And when the more you focus on clarifying and specifying exactly what it is that you want from a woman, intellectually, emotionally. For me, I travel quite a bit. So when I meet women, I often ask, do you travel? Have you lived in multiple places? Because that forms a bond between us. And women that haven't, that are more local, there tends to be more difficulty for me to connect. So you need to dig deep and figure out, okay, what kind of value or what kind of personality, what kind of emotional state do I want a woman to be in who I will expend effort trying to attract. So economize, and the more precise you can be with what you want, the more effective you'll be at selecting a potential subject, a potential woman, or a potential dating partner. Women do this by testing your strength or sensing how strong you are and whether or not your mission or your values align with theirs, or at least if they don't, whether or not there could be congruence, whether they could grow into that. For us, we need to assess not just whether they fit into our categories, our requirements, you might say, physically, or their values, their personality, etc. But also, does this woman feel the same way about me, okay? Because a lot of men are clueless when it comes to female choosing signals. And this is a theme I'll build on in other videos, but I can tell, generally speaking, in about 30 seconds if a woman is interested in me or not. And if she's not aggressively interested in me or emotionally, if she doesn't react to me, then I move on. And more or less, that's how you should be as well, because the game is economy. You don't want to waste time chasing women who do not reciprocate, okay? So economy is number one. Number two is illogic and nonlinearity. Now, this speaks to the temperament or the center of gravity for the female psyche. Women do not think logically the way that men do. And this is very difficult for men to believe or accept. And I'll give you some statistics that drive the cognitive dissonance among men. Men think, okay, well, if I go on a dating site, 80% of men, as decided by women, based on their choices and subsequently the algorithm, they're not going to like me because I'm not tall enough, because of my face shape, because I don't make enough income, because of the car I drive, the clothes I wear, whatever. Now, in a theoretical sense, this is all correct. But remember that what drives the female psyche and subsequently or consequently drives her attraction is not a logical framework. It's how she feels about you. And how she feels about you is illogical and nonlinear. I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean. So As a man, you think, well, she's attractive because she's young, or because of her face shape, because of the way her body moves, so forth and so on. But you probably prioritize women that are younger. You probably aren't going after women that are 50 years old, for example. And you might assume that, well, women would be similar, okay? They're not. And the reason for that is because it depends upon how you make them feel. So you could take a guy who's 6'5", who has all the bells and whistles that the algorithm wants, who is got a symmetrical face, who has the right job, and then you can put this guy into a scenario with another guy who's 50 years old. And the 50-year-old guy doesn't have those things. He's not as attractive, he's not as tall. He's got more experience, and that counts for a lot. But he doesn't have these other things that conceivably the algorithm tells you are exhaustive. In other words, if you have those, then a woman's going to like you. Well, because the 50-year-old man understands that it's how a woman feels, he can actually provoke a reaction in her based on that. Now remember that ultimately it's on her. In other words, there's only but so much you can manufacture, and we'll come back to that point later. But if she feels a certain way about this 50-year-old guy, despite the fact that he's not as good looking, he's obviously much older, he may not even have the same income level, if she feels something for him, that changes the game. And that renders him far more attractive than the man that has on paper everything that she wants. Now, what I'm driving at here in terms of illogic and nonlinearity is that the way you think about selecting a woman based on her beauty, her aesthetic, her youthfulness, that is not how women select men. It just isn't. There may be sufficient requirements, to be sure, or necessary requirements, but it doesn't mean that they are sufficient. And don't lose sight of that fact, okay? All right. So number one was economize or economy. Number two is illogic and nonlinearity. Number three is Venutian. So there was a famous book written years ago called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Well, that may seem a bit simplistic. There is much truth in that. And I use the term Venutian because the language of courtship or the language of dating is feminine language. It's communicating in many respects through context and subtlety. It is not the way men communicate, which is very direct and matter of fact. And so in order to interact with and ultimately to attract a female, you need to understand that you're speaking a radically different language. Now, some men are going to be better at this than others. There are these men, some people call them naturals, and they tend to naturally discern or detect the emotional state of a woman, and they can manipulate it accordingly. But most men aren't like that. Most men, myself included, have to learn what the process is really like. And that takes practice, it takes some expertise, it takes an open mind, right? Because you have to be open to learning Venutian, to learning the language of the feminine, which, as I say, is more emotional, it's nonlinear, it's illogical, it is subtle. It's about context, not content, as Rollo Tomassi says. So you have to be open to learning how to express yourself using a range or a continuum. And if you can do that, the bells and whistles just don't matter as much. Now again, the outliers matter. So if you're horrendously unattractive and extremely short or something, those things matter, to be sure. And there are tragic cases like that, but that's not true for the vast majority of men. Most of you who are watching this right now, that's not the case for, right? So it becomes an excuse, I think, for a lot of men that think the situation is hopeless. All right, so you have to learn how to speak Venutian. That's number three. Number four is the stage effect. So I've mentioned the stage effect before, or what I call the stage effect, which is this moment in time in which you're charismatic core competencies align. Well, that also applies when it comes to women, but it's slightly more complex because it's not just about maximizing all of the core elements of charisma, as I mentioned in the other video, courage and strength or polarity, all of these kinds of things. It's also about the way that you present yourself. All right? So there is this concept in the sexual marketplace called pre-selection. Pre-selection basically means that a woman sizes you up based on her prerequisites and selects you or deselects you. And again, this is accurate. There are many very specific things that women are looking for, especially today. And based on that, they will filter out a lot of men. But remember that is holistically speaking, or in aggregate. It doesn't apply on an individual to individual basis. So as soon as you interact with somebody, those models cease to be relevant. Every interaction is essentially self-contained. Don't forget that. So you need to create a kind of stage effect. Look, shooting YouTube videos creates a stage, right? Being an actor on a play creates a stage. The corner office in your company headquarters, that's a stage. Driving a certain car might be a stage in some sense, but whatever it is, it's got to be congruent with your authentic self. This is where a lot of men go wrong. They think, oh, if I have the right car or I have the right clothing, that will be enough. It's not enough, because you're missing that authenticity. You're missing that sincerity that speaks to who you really are. And so women will see through that. It won't be enough. And the ones who can't see through that are women you don't want to be with, okay? So the stage effect has to channel in a way that presents to the world your authentic self. And you don't need theatrics for this. You can accomplish this by walking into a cafe and using a certain word, right? I remember years ago, I was at a bar and I was chatting up a gal, and I used the word scoundrel. And I asked her later, I said, she was a very attractive girl. And I said, why did you find me interesting or different than others? She said, because I like that you used the word scoundrel. Well, again, that speaks to the nonlinearity, the illogic, but it's also a word that I use. I use a lot of words like that. So I wasn't manufacturing it. So you can't just take that word, assimilate it into your daily language, and then expect to generate results. It has to flow naturally with your masculine essence. Again, it has to be part of that stage effect, which is your charismatic core, your charismatic libidinous energy. All right, so those are more than a few concepts to work with. I'm going to leave you with one more, and that is polarity. Part of attraction between men and women is driven by conflict. It is not driven by accommodation. A lot of men mistake this, and they think, oh, well, if I'm very nice and I accommodate, then she'll like me, or then I will curry favor with her, and that will be conducive to a sexual or romantic encounter. That simply is not the case. Polarity is the key. And polarity, like the stage effect, depends upon the authenticity of what you're expressing. So, for example, a lot of times when I meet girls, because we live in clown world, as most of you know, my values clash with their values. And you might think that that's a deal breaker. Well, sometimes it is, but a lot of times, if you stand your ground and you do so in a playful and easygoing manner, you're actually going to translate that conflict into attraction. Remember, this goes back to the idea that men are ideas and women are the receptacle of those ideas, but women are also testing those ideas. So to some degree, when you interact with women like this and you demonstrate a clash of values, she's testing to see if you really sincerely believe it or if you're going to fold like most men. So, to summarize this brief venture through Brooklyn and addressing this topic of attraction, female attraction, and overcoming various limiting beliefs that most men have. Number one is economize. Economize your investment of time. Prioritize investing in women that will reciprocate and have high interest in you. That's number one. In other words, pursue the sexual marketplace or approach the sexual marketplace the same way women do, by being shrewd about who you're actually trying to attract, and then quickly deciding, hey, does this woman really like me or does she really not? Second is illogic and nonlinearity. Women do not contextualize, or they do not categorize men the way that men categorize women. It's not categorical. It's a continuum. It's a wave, all right? Third was the stage effect, all right? You want to find a mechanism by which you can present your authentic or sincere self to the world in an unabashed way, but a polished or a professional or a very acute, sharp way, right? That will emphasize who you are, and it will turn some women off and turn some women on. And that brings us to polarity, which is the final point here. And polarity is that clash or that conflict that's done or executed in a playful way, such that you can benefit from showing your authentic self and to some degree pushing her away and seeing, well, is she good enough for you, right? Think of that as the way we test them. Are they going to conform to our worldview, our value sets, or are they not? And then the other concept, of course, is Venutian. You need to learn how to communicate with subtlety. You need to approach a woman indirectly with your body language, with your language, but directly with your body language. Push-pull, and there's a lot more to that, so I'll share that in time. Anyway, I hope this was useful. We'll talk more about this in later videos, so stay tuned for more, and we'll talk soon.